our next session is for all those people this morning who are interested in creative writing, and all of those people out there who are doing EMAs, because I think one thing OU students do well is writing. We do enjoy a lot of writing and do it regularly. Derek Neale, you're here to talk to us about the creative writing part 2. So this is the Masters, and this is the second year module of that Masters. You'll see some widgets also on your screen we'd like you to vote on. Do you aspire to be a published writer? Are you considering studying the MA Creative Writing? And also, which genre of the ones that we've selected appeal to you? You get one choice. Click on the button that applies to you, and then you can close the widget and see what other people have said. So, Derek, let's just talk a little bit through the context of this second year in terms of the overall MA.
Right, the first part is 60 credits. This one, the second part, is 120 credits, and it's a whole calendar year. So it starts at the start of October and finishes the end of September in 2018, this first run. And a good part of it is independent study, and it's got a, as you would expect with the creative writing dissertation module, it's got a 15,000 word dissertation at the end of it, and it's got the usual choice of genres. So students can take fiction, they can take poetry, they can take script, or they can take creative non-fiction.
So they choose one of these genres that they'll have explored in the first year of the Masters, and then this is their chance to sort of specialise on that. So they'll find a genre that's right for you. Now, one of the questions I know that can come up is can I write a novel as part of this? Is writing work that the aim is to get published a large part of doing this Masters? You
can write a substantial amount of a novel during this course. So, for instance, you can have up to 23,000 words of creative writing assessed, which is quite a big chunk of a novel. But you've also got venues for peer reviewing, so you can write other sections of the novel that are just peer reviewed and not assessed by your tutor. So there's a potential there for you to write, you know, certainly a novel-size amount of text, certainly, or a feature-length film, or a collection of poems, or a memoir, or a biography.
Now, whilst people can select a genre, is there anything to stop them from writing in another genre while they're going through the process?
Certainly not. What we've got set up on the MA is quite unique, I think. While you choose a primary genre which you focus on, such as fiction, you're still able to submit your poetry to the nationwide, the module-wide forums in poetry, and to the VLE's workshop in poetry. So even though you're concentrating on fiction, for instance, or script, or whatever, you can actually submit other genres as well for peer review. So you can actually develop your skills in other genres while you're focusing on your main genre.
Excellent. That's a brilliant selling point. We'll talk a little bit more about the review process, but first, if we could just sort of get the sort of formalities, I guess, out of the way in terms of the assessment then. How does it work in terms of what people submit and the end of module assessment?
Most of the assessments are what I'd call typical creative writing assessments, in the respect that you submit a piece of creative writing. So you submit a short story or a chapter of a novel, or a section of memoir, or a couple of scenes from a script, and you usually submit an accompanying commentary with that as well, a critical commentary, which reveals what your reading has been, what your viewing has been, and how that contributes to what you've written, and what your critical opinion of those works is. The other thing that you will do here is write about the influences, the writers that you've come across in your particular genre that have caused you to write in the first place, that have motivated you and made you want to write, and the writers that you've learnt most from. And you'll also write a critical commentary, a substantial critical commentary, and at the end, as I say, you'll write a 15,000 word or equivalent. We've got equivalent, so 15,000 words amounts, for instance, to almost 2 hours of script.
So let's talk about the peer process, which you said was one of the innovative aspects, and I think certainly one that would really appeal, especially if you had the space to be able to write slightly more than you needed to just for the assessment. So tell us then about how this all works.
Creative writing, not just at the OU but everywhere, is premised on the exchange of work. I give you a piece of work to look at, you give me a piece of work to look at, and we exchange work and criticise that work, and we learn how to take the criticism, and we learn how to discern what is good criticism, what is useful criticism, and what is not so good, not so useful in this particular circumstance. And we become better editors as a result of this. We become better writers. And this peer review process accelerates the development of your writing skills. And that's the whole premise of it. At the OU, the way we do it, in my opinion, is facilitated and improved by the fact that we've got online venues to do it. No more photocopying of work, no more distribution of work through the mail. It's all there electronically, magically, for everybody to see almost immediately, as soon as you've put the last full stop in there. And so there's two main ways that we exchange views on work. One is peer reviewing via the forums, and there's a tutor group forum and there's nationwide forums specific to each genre. And then we also have a VLE tool called the Workshop, which allows people to distribute work and feedback across the whole cohort. So, for instance, in the Part 1 MA, we've got nearly 500 students, and you can distribute and exchange work and feedback with all of those students, or all of those students who are doing the same genre as you.
Wow. I wonder if we could look at that sort of idea about genres. I mean, we asked our audience about whether they aspire to be published writers. 50% of them said yes, 36% were not sure, and 14% said no. And then we've also asked them about which genre would appeal to them. Now, fiction was way in the lead here with 69%, second by creative non-fiction. And then poetry and not sure were down the line. Is that a fairly representative split of the genres, and sort of how might students then engage with other students if, for example, there were a lot of students writing fiction? How does that all work?
Well, it is typical. Those proportions are typical. On the Part 1 of the MA, for instance, we've got 70% of the students are writing fiction, and the other three genres are split, pretty much 10% each. How you cope when you've got so many students studying the same genre is that you have tutor group forums, and you have a choice of venues, and that's the strength of the way work is exchanged via this system at the OU. You can if you're receptive to small group working, then in Part 2 of the MA, there's only 10 people in a tutor group. So it's a very small, intimate and quite safe environment to exchange work in. But you still get access to the bigger venues, so the whole cohort, the 300 students or 400 students or whatever, if you want to.
Yeah. Now, what's so fantastic about your tutor-student relationships is you select your tutors very carefully. They're all practising, aren't they?
They're all practising writers, they're all published writers, all performed writers, so the script writers teach script writing, the poets teach poetry, the fiction writers are novelists in their own right.
And then students are grouped accordingly by genre?
They are grouped according to genre, yes.
Excellent. What happens if they change their mind halfway through?
It causes us problems, and it's not insurmountable, but it causes us slight problems. Such students might be stuck with a tutor who doesn't specialise in their genre for a small amount of time. But having said that, most writers nowadays write in more than one genre. Mm-hmm. So even though they might mainly be a novelist or might mainly be a scriptwriter, such writers usually have at least one other string to their bow. They write in another genre as well.
Now, you've told us about the tutor group forums and the ways of interacting both on a small scale and a much larger scale. But talk us through A Writer in the World. Writer
in the World is a section that continues on from professional practice in the Part 1 of the MA. And it's about how student writers, would-be writers, new writers, then take their writing beyond the workshop, beyond exchanging it with peers. How do you take your writing into the world? How do you approach an agent? How do you pitch your idea? How do you write a treatment for a film? How do you write a scenario for a stage play? All these sorts of things are dealt with in this part in these sections of Part 2. And there'll be a forum associated with this special part of the course as well. And in that forum, we hope to have guest industry professionals visiting from time to time.
Now you have things like, how to get published and these visiting industry professionals. I mean, what a fantastic link for students to be able to go and talk to them and ask questions and also hear what other students are asking.
Yes, I mean, it is a fantastic resource. And I would say that there are loads of interviews, recorded interviews, in the course materials with such industry professionals as well. With, for instance, the commissioning editor for a radio drama at BBC, wow. Jeremy Howe, the chief radio editor, Toby Swift, is also interviewed there. An executive producer from the BBC, Marion Nancaro, also interviewed. Sally Wainwright of Happy Valley fame and who wrote the Bronte film. Just before Christmas, she's interviewed as well. So there's loads of writers and industry professionals that are interviewed for the MA.
Excellent. Now, a lot of this is independent study. So you've mentioned that, there will be things in terms of the taught aspects, the forums, the tutorials, etc. But the independent study is arguably the most important part of any postgraduate work. And you've mentioned that students can write a substantial part of whatever it is they're writing as part of this process and get the feedback on that to then improve their work. How does the independent study work?
The independent study is threaded throughout the module. It's expected in every 1 week the student will engage in some independent study, but there is a big block of it at the end, some 20-odd weeks of independent study, where the students aren't left entirely on their own. They're left on their own in the respect that the tutor engagement will be lighter than it was before, but they will have each other. They will have their forums, they will have the workshop tools, so they'll still be able to peer review each other's work. So in a way, by that time, the self-support mechanisms will be built up.
Now, you've mentioned the tutorials the tutors, but I wonder if you can tell us about the tutorials and how people would sort of get that interaction. Is it very, very forum-based with this asynchronous form of communication?
It is asynchronous, purely asynchronous, in fact. There might be one or two more synchronous events, and I say it very vaguely at the moment because they're not well defined at the moment, but there might be some more synchronous type events, but most of it, almost 99% of the course will be asynchronous, and the tutorials are manifest in the way that the tutors moderate the forums, both their tutor group forums, and they will co-moderate the Writer in the World forum and the nationwide, the module-wide script forum, fiction forum, poetry forum and creative non-fiction forum.
So students get access to lots of different voices, which is wonderful, at a time that suits them.
They do.
And of course, I guess being reflective and being able to pick things up, have a look at them in your own time is also something that would be very much akin to the writing process.
Yeah. I mean, the idiosyncratic thing about writing, it's a very, very solitary business. Mm-hmm. And the virtue of this course and the virtue of most MAs, in my opinion, is that it brings people together and allows them conversations and discussions about the technical issues and the content issues and the how to get published issues. All those really, really essential issues about what it is to write. Okay,
now, you've mentioned that this is 120 credits, so there's 60 credits in the 9 months, which is the first year, which people have already done, and then this is 120 credits, so almost double. What happens then if life gets in the way, as it sometimes can? And on the module, it says you can do this in 2 to 10 years. So what is the interrupted study option, if there is indeed one, and how might students go about that?
Well, the official interrupted study is you take a break between the two modules.
Right.
So you can take one in 2016, and you can take the second one in 2020 or whatever, if you want to. And nothing will be lost in that. If circumstances arise whereby you have to take a break in the second module, for instance, in part 2, then you will, your assessments will be banked, but it's not an official way of taking a break.
Okay. So really the idea is to sort of get that dissertation pre-planned and ready in terms of the work that you're going to do in the second year, well, not dissertation, but the substantive piece of work, and then really try and plan for as much as possible within that, with the support that you've got from the tutors, etc.
Yeah, there are several formative assessments and things that happen within the part 2 of the MA that lead towards the final dissertation. One of them is they have to write a proposal for it. The next is that they have to write some draft material, 10% of it, and it gets feedback from the tutor during the period of independent study, in actual fact. And so there are all these sorts of things. There's also a questionnaire task that they have to undertake, which gets them to analyse what they're actually doing in their AMA. So there's loads of little tools and techniques that are in play that facilitates the development of their AMA and their bigger piece of work. Because for most students at that time in their module and that time in their study, it's the biggest piece of work they've ever written.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, well, it's a substantial piece of work, isn't it? Yeah. So we've asked people about whether they're considering doing this, and some of them have already started. Some of them say it sounds interesting. So at the last count, we had 36% saying it sounds interesting, and 36% saying yes, and 7% have already started the MA. And I know you had a lot of students on that first level, which is brilliant. What might students do if they have started before September in their summer break, or even if they're thinking about taking year 1? Are there any MOOCs that you could recommend, or any things that students could start to prepare for study?
What we always recommend is to start writing fiction MOOC on FutureLearn. And that's running at the moment. So if you Google FutureLearn, start writing fiction, you'll get there.
Okay.
And that's in week 4, I think, of its 8-week presentation. Mm-hmm. But the good thing I'd say about that, even if you're wary of joining if you're behind, once you've joined, you've got access to the website and all the resources forever. Yeah. It stays with you afterwards. The other place you can go is OpenLearn. Yep. There's an equivalent version of that MOOC on OpenLearn. So again, Google Start Writing Fiction OpenLearn and you'll get there. Or we might have the links on our page, on the hub page, possibly.
Excellent. And we've got some tasters and exercises from the module, and you can also listen to interviews with authors on FutureLearn. And there's the USA group, the Write Club.
The Write Club, yes, and they're a fantastic point of contact because they're always looking for more people to engage in their peer review of each other's work. That's what they do outside of their OU study. And they started, I think, they'll correct me if I'm wrong, but they started, I think, as OU A803 students. And they started peer reviewing and they got on so well with it and enjoyed it so much and gained so much from it that they started doing it outside of class, so to speak. Yeah. And that's the A803 coursebook that they were engaged in. That's the undergraduate level 3 course.
Wonderful. And there are wonderful stuff. I know you don't even have to be studying creative writing to join them. They're open to everyone. And that process and giving feedback, I guess, is quite a skill in itself.
It is. It is an art form in itself, and receiving the feedback is an art form in itself. It's what writing is all about, really, because it takes a lot of skill to actually say no to a comment, as well as to say yes and to accept it. To actually have your best passage trashed and to accept that trashing is really quite an important skill to have. Yeah. To be able to accept that.
Yeah, especially something so personal. Yeah. But I'm sure they do it in a very appropriate way.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the skill that's hopefully taught and learned on these courses, is that skill of appropriate, positive criticism. So you actually affirm while actually pointing out what is critically not working.
Yeah, to improve your work. It sounds absolutely fantastic. Derek, Neale, thank you so much for filling us in on that.
Well,
and you've certainly got some very enthusiastic people out there who are interested in this second stage of the module.
Right, thank you.
Lovely. OK, HJ and Sophie, we've got just a little minute to have a quick check-in. How's everything at home?
Everything's good. We've just been having a chat with Sin from the Write Club. She's popped in just to see us and have a quick chat and tell us more about that, which it sounds like a great forum, as you said, for students to meet up and just engage otherwise outside of study. We've also had Mark Simmons as well, who's worked on A803 to pop into a chat to talk with us as well. So it's been a good discussion, and there's been lots of questions that we've had help with in this session.
Yes, so a big debate on creative writing and how, to what extent is everything creative writing.
Yes.
So that was really interesting, actually. It was a really nice little conversation. So Mark has really helped, so thank you, Mark, just for answering everyone's questions. And yeah, everyone seems to really enjoy the session, which is really nice.
Wonderful, excellent. Well, we're going to show you a quick video now, which is about DD317, Advancing Social Psychology, which is our next session. So enjoy the video, grab a cup of tea, and I'll see you in a few minutes.